Hello everyone, welcome to today's product school. In today's session, we are going to cover the importance of design for AI products. Who am I? I am Debapriya Basu, a principal product manager at Zillow, and I specialize in AI products and technology. This is my second talk in product school about AI, the first one being around leading AI incubations. What I will cover today are a few important things to remember as we approach design for AI systems. Um, the principle of design, the guidelines for different user interaction stages, and the framework of the design process. What's important for us to understand that our primary goal in the business of building software is to understand and solve for real customer problems. Artificial intelligence helps in solving the problem, and design helps take the solution to the end users. So, both of them need to work in tandem to not only solve the problem, but make it easy and intuitive for the users to use. As a product manager, as I walk through the principles of design, I will focus on important things which are true for any product manager, artificial intelligence or not, or any product designer, or any user researcher. Our job is to deeply understand customer needs, influence and inspire the design process, and distill the research uh, and design thought process into a language that end users understand. One very critical aspect that we need to understand is the product manager is not going to operate in isolation. He or she will form a V team consisting of researchers, user researchers, designers, scientists, engineers as they embark on this design process. And it's very important for this process to be collaborative so that all aspects of a user need are covered. So, without further ado, I'll get into the details of principles of design. The first and the fundamental principle is embracing customer need. It is super important for us to deeply understand customer needs, and AI products are no different. So, let's take the example of Z-Estimate. Now, Z-Estimate, while Zillow embarked on the journey of finding out Z-Estimate or computing Z-Estimate, they first focused on what the need was. So, what was the need? The need was that end users or customers found it incredibly painful and sometimes long process to just learn how much their home was worth in current conditions. They had a cumbersome process. Would have to talk to one agent or multiple agents. Sometimes these agents would give them different information. Um, so it was definitely a very long and cumbersome process for end users to just know how much their uh, house was worth. So what Zestimate did was to just cater to that need. It started with generating a home estimate for a user for the next 1 year. What did the design and the AI achieve here? Not only did it make the home estimate easily accessible for the users, it also explained why a certain estimate was given. Well, like you see in the picture here, that it spoke about the features that the model used, like neighborhood details, popularity on Zillow, home facts, listing price. So it basically democratized access to home estimate information for the users. And that's why it became so popular. Then Zillow took it one step further. It tried to mimic the mental model of users. How do users think? When you go and see a house, how do you determine the condition of the house? You look at the home, you try and figure out if it's an old home, if it's a new home, if it needs renovation. Zillow tried to mimic that same process in Zestimate. It used computer vision to understand the quality of homes from the photographs and incorporated that feature into the Zestimate. With this, Zestimate went from embracing a customer need to providing an easily accessible and understandable estimate, and then took it further to mimic a customer's mental model. The next and very important principle of design for AI systems are around building trust. So Rachel Botsman, she talks about trust as a mechanism, a psychological mechanism to go from known to unknown. So in order for customers to bridge this gap, it is the job of all of us who are in the business of building software, whether product managers, designers, researchers, scientists, engineers, everybody, to help customers on that journey. How can we do that? Very simple. We can think of ways to communicate that the AI product is well-intentioned. It performs the way we claimed it would, and that it was safe to use and it was correctly built. It's important to follow all of this during product design and development, but it's also very important to communicate this repeatedly to customers to build and maintain their trust. With that, I move into an area that is very important for AI these days. That's ethical AI. There are 2 or 3 very important components of ethical AI, and I will come back to this later when I discuss guidelines. But fundamentally, privacy and fairness are super important. For people to trust AI algorithms, AI product, and their design, it's important that AI models are built within guardrails to ensure that users cannot be identified or their details inferred from the product output. What's the job of design here? The job of design here is to make it very well known and well understandable for users about what is the data that's being collected from them, how is the data being used in modeling process, and what should they expect out of the AI product. If design can ensure that these information are communicated in an easy and understandable fashion to users, user trust increases. Similarly, let's come to fairness. Now, AI or ML models are very dependent on the data that they are trained on. And a big part of our job as product managers and designers is to ensure that the training data is not biased with respect to protected attributes like race, gender, or sexuality. It should not be optimized for a heavy user. It should not overrepresent one population of users in the training set. So all of this is super important as we build an AI product. And what I'm trying to stress here is this is not the job of the AI models in isolation or the design in isolation. Both of them have to work together to ensure that the product upholds privacy and fairness values. This is Joy Bualamwini. She works on uncovering bias in different facial recognition technologies across the world. Her study around Project Gender Shades actually uncovered that facial analysis technologies have a heavy bias towards white males. And with with the findings of that study, a lot of big technology companies have now invested in what is called bias busting tools. Moving on, the third and the final principle of AI product design is that AI should amplify human capabilities. One of the things I often ask while starting a new AI project is, can this problem be solved without AI? If there was no AI present, how would users solve this problem? And in most cases, they can solve this problem. AI brings about a certain value in solving the problem. It could help by identifying complex patterns to predict outcomes. It could adapt outcomes to inputs in real life. It could scale on vast data sets really, really fast. It could enable personalization. But remember, all of these things are amplification of something that the user could already do. So I think the value of AI is to amplify human capabilities and not replace it. I think that's super important. Like, take this example. Google Pixel Buds, they integrated with Google Assistant, and now from your Pixel Buds, you can use personalized recommendations. You can do automated personal communication using smart reply. You could automate monotonous tasks like setting timers. So what they are basically doing is, uh, they Google Pixel Buds managed to take an existing productivity solution using AI and making it easy for people to use it. And that's the value of good design. Now, I move to the second section of this talk, which is the guidelines for user interaction stages. So there are different stages of user interaction that has happened. My friend and colleague from Microsoft, Salima Amershi, has written a wonderful paper in this regard. So if you look at the journey of user interactions with a product, with an AI product, there are a couple of stages. One is before the first interaction, during the course of the interaction, of course, when things go wrong, and over continued repeated interaction. What I will do in the next few slides is I'm going to actually talk about the different guidelines for each stage of interaction with examples. So let's start with before the first interaction. Clarify what the system can do. So if you look here, this is a fitness tracker. It very clearly says that it's going to measure things like distance, calories, minutes, and flows. What this does is it sets up user expectation. So a user will not be expecting something else and then getting some other information in the app. So starting with clarify what the system can do. The second one, clarify how well the system can do what it promises to do. So this is a Netflix recommendation. We all look at Netflix recommendations. And here, Netflix clearly says, because you watch Sense8, this is why you're getting to see these set of movies. Now we move to the next phase, which is during the interaction. Now what happens here? We should show contextually relevant insights. Take a look. This is acronyms in Microsoft Word. What it does is it finds, once a Microsoft Word document is open, it finds out all the acronyms in that document and tries to provide expansions about those acronyms within a user's scope. So acronyms that are unique to your work environment, to your company, those kind of acronyms will definitely show up here. So this is a great example of showing contextually relevant insights, because you are in the Word document, you're trying to read it, you are hitting into these acronyms you don't know the meaning of, and voila, Word is there to assist you. Then look at the second one, matching relevant social norms. As AI tries to mimic user behavior, I think the fundamental part is of making that communication between human and AI systems is to make that communication as social as possible, uh, as closely mirroring to a normal two-way conversation between two human beings. So the H&M chat assistant here starts off with um, a hello, and then what is even interesting is it finds out what is the time of the day for me, and then addresses me accordingly. Uh, the third aspect or the third guideline is mitigate social bias. Now, this is a Google Translate example that I'm talking about here, where it's a conversion from Turkish to English, and instead of Google uh, showing bias about saying that the person is a he or a she, Google basically shows um, both the options and leaves it on the user to choose the response that he or she wants. Time services based on context. This is a classic example where Google Maps uh, very timely reminds you that you have to leave for the airport. So it takes into account the time of your flight, the time of commute from your current location to the airport, and gives you a timely and notification. So these are all guidelines that should be followed uh, as we design through the user interaction process. The third one is very important: when things go wrong, and things will go wrong, let's accept it. How do you manage when things go wrong? The first thing design for AI systems should do is it should allow for efficient invocation. If things go wrong and users are hitting a dead end, we have to make it super simple and well understood by them about how to go back to the starting point again. In the first case, like users, it's very well known that when you say Alexa, you wake up the Amazon Echo Dot. So users know, they have learned it. It's a very well known practice of waking up voice assistants. So users know if anything goes wrong, they can wake up Alexa and they can reframe their question and again get to the answer. The second one is allow efficient correction. Now, this is again an example from Microsoft Word. What happens here is alt text is text that's allowed for photos. Ideally, Word uses its intelligence services to generate alternative text for photographs. But what good design does here is it makes the end user the ultimate arbiter of the alternate text. So if the end user wants to correct the alternate text or put a friendly version or a personalized version of the text, Word makes it easy for the user to triumph. That is what is good design. The other one is around allow efficient dismissal. So look at YouTube. YouTube showed you something, some recommendation, you didn't like it. It should be very easy for the user to dismiss that recommendation. And most successful recommender systems make it very easy to dismiss recommendations and also to provide feedback in general. Then let's move to the Google Maps one. Here, clarify what the system does. Why is this important? So basically, here Google Maps gives a couple of options of traveling from my house to Space Needle. What it does is it doesn't make any assumption. Uh, it doesn't make any assumption of whether I would prefer a route with two tolls or not. But what it does is it tells me very clearly why it is showing um, the toll route as the recommended route, because it's optimizing for speed and reduced time of commute. So just this clarification about why the first route was uh, chosen as the topmost as the most relevant option makes it easier for me as a customer to select. I don't have to spend my brain cycles thinking, why did Google recommend this when I actually wanted to go a non-toll route and things like that. And finally, scope services when in doubt. Now, as people type in search engines, auto suggestions pop up. It is important to provide auto suggestions of different scopes when the system is not aware of what the user wants. So it could be like when I type smoke Seattle, it could be about smoke Seattle in Washington. It could be about uh, I could be looking about information explicitly for today. I could be looking about smoke information for the whole entire year. So instead of Google making a judgment call of what I want, they actually provide me all the options. And with that, I'll transition into the last user interaction stage, which is basically continued repeated interaction. So over a period of time, as a human user interacts with an AI system, what are the different design principles or design guidelines that would help the user to remain sticky? First and foremost, learn from user behavior. And that is the cornerstone of personalization. Sephora, Amazon, all Netflix, everywhere there's a lot of personalization that is happening these days. Even the houses that you see on Zillow are recommended based on your interactions with our website. Then the second one is update and adapt cautiously. Now, why is this very important? This is super important because what happens here is it's important for users to habituate with the design. What that means is if we change too much of the design every few days, it creates a jerk in users' mind. So what do we do? On one hand, we really want AI to learn fast from user recommendations, and we want users to provide feedback and engagement deeply with our sites. And then we want our AI systems to learn from those interactions, and we want the AI systems to update themselves and their models based on user interactions. But then what is the perfect balance? How often do we show users those changed recommendations? Do we show them every time? Well, not quite, because that might throw users off, because it might mess with their sense of habituation on the site. So Apple Music does a wonderful job. There's only one tile that gets changed as new recommendations come in, but the other part of the UI remains the same. This kind of design makes it extremely sticky for users. And then the final one is around encouraging granular feedback. Um, this is a Facebook ad feedback. It's very important for AI systems to particularly know when things go wrong and users don't like their recommendations. Why do they not like it? The more granular we get, the better models we build. Moving on, convey consequences of user action. So if a user has taken the time and effort to produce, to give feedback, tell them what you're going to do with the feedback. Tell them that your feedback is going to help us improve the relevance of recommendations. It's going to help us improve our models. That creates this dialogue between the user and the AI system, and which makes the user slowly invested in the AI system as well. Um, Provide global controls. Like in this case, like Google Maps basically does provide global controls for a user to decide if he or she wants various photo apps to collect Google Map information about photos. So ultimately, the user is the one with the superpower. He or she gets to decide if he or she wants location information in his or her photo app. Uh, then, a very important part is notify users about change. So, as the AI model gets better and better, as new features are introduced, or as new AI products are introduced, it's very important to inform people about the upcoming change rather than just showing the change to them one day. Google does it beautifully. G Suite actually created this pane which called Explore. It's a sort of a AI pane. So when users click on Explore, they know that they are transitioning into the AI world, and so any new insights that are generated or about the current document or new features or products are released, all of those, that release management happens through Explore. So what Google has done beautifully is create that that UX area that in a user's head, so the user knows that if it's blinking out here, then probably there's something new that's coming up. With that, I'll go into the PM designer framework for the design process. Now, this is think of it as the different things or the different steps that the PM, designer, and the user researcher, sometimes also the engineers and the scientists, need to collaborate together and remember through the design process. So the first one is, of course, around identifying user need and how can AI help in the process. So research, like understand the user need, user research, opportunity analysis, competitive analysis, strategic documents, all of that contribute to this bucket. The next one is around objective or reward function. So once you've identified the user need, like the next question is, what kind of AI technology will help solve it? Is it prediction, classification, something else? Then arrive on your objective function. What is the prediction you want to do? Or if you are talking about reinforced systems, arrive at your reward function. What do you want to conclude? The third one is experiences. Now, identify a hero experience to ideate on. Then define success. And here I'll spell it out. Oftentimes people get into this discussion about using model metrics for success definition. That is important. But when we are talking about design, success should be defined in terms of online metrics. So define success in terms of online metrics. Yes, model metrics are important for the quality of the AI technology being built, but in the design process, please focus on defining success in terms of online metrics. And then finally, align all the stakeholders to a common understanding of what the user problem is, and then what's the proposed AI-infused experience. I think that's a good starting point for the design process. The next one, yes, collect data. Data is super important for AI. Collect data to train your models. Look at aspects like first-party, third-party data, privacy and security concerns, whether your training data is fresh, is it unbiased, is it representative of different segments, is it relevant, like do you have missing data, noisy data, inconsistent data. Do all of those data corrections as you set up the training data set. Then design for label generators. Now, what does that mean? A good quality training data is the first step to a successful AI model. Now, or an AI product for that matter. Now, there is this category of people called label generators. They're also known as annotators. Now, annotators could be a lot of people. It could be end users who are working on beta. It could be crowdsourced annotators, or it could be super specialized annotators. What is important for the design team to remember here is that as they design how and they set up the annotation guidelines, they should accommodate for the diversity of raters and their context and incentive. Like, are they incentivized to provide the highest quality labels? So that is super important. An example of a label could be that you are building a software which detects, which predicts whether there is a cat in the photo or not. So the people who are tagging whether the initial data set has cat photos, what's the incentive of that person to do it? Is that person incentivized to provide the best labels, or is the person incentivized to finish like 100 generation of 100 labels in an hour to get paid? So keep in mind all of those as you set up the design process. And finally, decide on the AI technology. If you're going down the machine learned route model, do you want supervised model, unsupervised model, reinforced models? Usually, if you design a net new AI product, you start with either supervised or unsupervised. And then as the feedback starts coming in, as in that the AI product is launched and users start interacting and providing feedback, that is the time when reinforced machine learned techniques come into play. Again, what are the different kinds of modeling techniques you want to use? Deep learning, NLP, ensemble learning. Ensemble learning is where you use multiple models. And also you would choose to go with pre-trained models. So all of those decisions start happening at this point. Stage 3 is, of course, designed to meet user mental models. What does this mean? What it means is that the user, coming back to my original point, that users already have a way of doing a certain thing. So what we need to do is first understand their existing mental model. So a good process is to look at user groups and their primary flow, identify who are the novice users and how do they navigate their flow, who are the expert users and how do they navigate their flow, and what are their current mental models. So once you've done that, you've kind of set up the base. Now you move to the next part, which is influence the mental model. So of course, you want users to behave a certain way with these AI-assisted products, and that requires a certain change to their mental model. So clarify future mental models, create bridge from current to future, and explain the cause and effect of AI models. So take a look at this Google Drive. Here with quick access, what Google has done is it's created this UI at the top of the page where documents that are most frequently accessed are shown. And then there is, again, all the other documents in the drive that's also available for the users. Now, without quick access, how would people interact? What was their mental model? They would either save or favorite their documents, or they would try to search. So what quick access is doing is it is taking this mental model of favoriting and taking it one step further and saying that AI can help you with that process by showing you the most relevant and the most accessed file at the top, so that you get productive and you get to your most interacted documents in the least amount of time. So here's a perfect bridge created from an existing mental model of searching, favoriting, or sorting and then finding out your document to actually just finding out in the quick access pane. The next stage, and very important one, is test. So whatever you build, please test. So when you come up with a mental model, a future mental model of how AI will help the users to interact with the system, test it. How do you do it? Onboard some users, ask them what they thought the product will do, study their reactions to wireframes and prototypes, and learn about their expectations about using the AI experience. Why is this important? It is important because it helps us to understand that how realistic is the future mental model. Are we asking too much of the end user? Can we make it easier for them? And then the other one is around testing product iterations and product designs. Two kinds of testing are very insightful in my opinion, things that I've used. One is called guerrilla testing. What happens in guerrilla testing is the subjects or the end users are caught off guard. Um, and they are shown some wireframes and their behavior is studied. So oftentimes if you have let's say you see, you can show them a prototype and see them work through the prototype and just observe them. Why is this kind of testing important? Because what it does, it captures the raw reaction to people to a certain design. It's spontaneous, it's not rehearsed. And that is super important. If we want to build sticky systems, we want to understand how users think spontaneously. And I have found that guerrilla testing is super important for, strategic decision making, because it's low key, it's cheap to implement, it can be done by anybody. When I say anybody in the design process. So it's relatively lightweight, but also gives immense insight. One thing to keep in mind is this kind of testing is more suitable to be done earlier in the process than later. The second kind of testing is called Wizard of Oz testing. It's very commonly used in voice assistants. And what it does is it basically provides a half-working, like a prototype, and it allows users to interact with the system, but the system does not have to be full built. So maybe somebody is, so the subject or the user is sitting in front of the system and trying to get responses, while as the responses are generated by the researcher or the product manager or the designer instead of a system. And we want to understand the response of the subject to these recommendations. I have used it when I was the PM for At a Glance at Microsoft. We used it on this At a Glance feature from SharePoint, where we actually showed users some high confidence recommendations about key points in a document and some low confidence results, and we studied their reaction for how happy did they get when they saw something that matched their expectations, how unhappy were they when we showed them something that did not match their expectation. And one of the great things that came out of it was people are usually looking for no more than 3 key points of a document to triage, and then they want the first key point to be very precise, and then the precision can drop as we go down the order. Also, the key points that are shown here, the first key point should be relatively higher up in the original document. So there should be a sense of match between the sequence of the key points and the sequence in which they show up in the document. So again, at a glance was a, a extractive summary of the document that we were providing for end users to triage their documents really fast. And so all of these insights that came from the Wizard of Oz testing helped us guide the design of the project. Then, next very important part of the framework is transparent and explainable and trustworthy AI. So I've covered this as part of the principles, but I'm going to spend some time. So a good AI product will actually tell users how a certain recommendation is generated. So in case of Zestimate, it tells what are the model features: neighborhood, home facts, popularity of Zillow, listing price. So users can look at it and say, oh, I think now I understand why the house is priced at a certain number. Again, when we are showing recommendations, we should show model confidence. So this is a screenshot from the Nordstorm app, where it suggests both high matches, medium matches, and low matches. And what it does, tries to address user expectations in a normal way. So if there is something a user hates which show up as a low match, the user is more likely to be kind to the AI system than if it just showed up as a match. Again, mention your data sources, like tell the users why certain recommendations were shown. Amazon does it great. It says that, well, we tried to put you in a segment of users, and other users in the same segment looked at these books, so we thought you would like them too. So when I see the recommendations and these are books I haven't thought about, I think, that seems reasonable. Yeah, I might be interested in those. So that's the job of design, to start the conversation between the product and the user. And finally, fairness. It's very important to be fair. So this is again from Project Gender Shades that Joy is leading in MIT. And what she's ensuring here is that the data sets that are used to create the models are fair, and they provide equanimous representation for all different individuals, or all different classes of people, or segments of people, or users. So that's super important. The next one, again, very, very important for AI, is incorporating feedback. Think of feedback as the flywheel or the fuel for AI systems. So feedback can be implicit, it can be explicit. So like explicit feedback you see everywhere, like likes, dislikes, granular feedback. All of this is super important for AI systems to learn about what users are liking or disliking. But always keep in mind two things. The volume of explicit feedback is always low, number one. And number two, people are more likely to give negative feedback than positive feedback. What I mean by that is, if experiences go according to people's expectations, human beings are not incentivized to provide feedback. But if something does not agree with them, they're more likely to give feedback. So when you are using these kind of explicit feedback to better your models, it's important to set the weights accordingly. But the most important category of feedbacks that I want to discuss that's super critical is implicit feedback. What it means here is we deduce whether a user liked or disliked something based on their behavior on our website or app or our experience. This kind of feedback is, of course, has more volume, so is more usable for the AI systems, for the AI models. Here I've listed out a bunch of YouTube implicit signals, both positive and negative, like subscribe to channel, add to playlist, add to watch later, positive signals. Bounced off after a few seconds, watched video in bits and pieces, all negative signals. So this is super important. What's the role of design here? So design should make it very easy for users to give explicit signal. Design should make it very easy for engineers to collect implicit signals from the UX, and then it's the job of the engineers to ensure that the UX is properly instrumented so that all the implicit signals that users are providing on the website, all the behavior that users are demonstrating on the app is carried back, is piped back in correct form to the AI models. And then to one of my favorites, like things will go bad. That's the reality. AI systems are no different. So how do we degrade gracefully? Like, let me first take the first example. I got one for a day, my Google Home was down, and I got a very personal email from Google Home team saying why it went down. And what it does, it made it easier for me to understand why the Google Home was down for a whole of the day. So that's really good management of an angry user. Again, think of like search engines sometimes land up with no recommendations for a query. So instead of just saying no results were found, why don't we try and understand how we can help the users? So instead of sending them down a dead path, let's give them alternate suggestions, like category suggestion, alternate queries, personalized recommendation, helpful links, popular products, popular categories. What this does in a sense is it takes the user and helps the user go and finally get what he or she is looking for. That actually creates a very good relationship between the user and the AI product. So degrading gracefully is again something that should be done. This often becomes an afterthought, but I think as a product manager, our job is to not only manage the happy part well, but also the not so happy part well. With that, I think I've covered a ground for how the design process for AI products and technology should be set up. And when I mean design, I mean user experience design. What I covered are the cornerstone principles, how to design for different user interaction stages, and what's the framework of the design process. I would love to know your comments, please, and thoughts. Please reach out to me at my email address, and also let me know if these AI talks are helping you and what kind of content you would like to see more. Thank you so much.